Yo, Tool Shifty crew, what is good with y'all today? It's your boy Bwithdashifts. Today we got things that got banned because one person ruined it. Shout out Trust Me, bro. We've reacted to him before and we've got more of his stuff today. Make sure y'all like and subscribe. Go follow my Twitch, twitch.tv/Bwithdashifts1.
Banned because one person ruined it for everyone. Last meal larceny. It's no secret that even the worst people on this earth still get the opportunity to have a nice meal before they go. The American tradition of offering a last meal to people on death row has been going on for a long time. However, did you know that in most prisons, last meals are not nearly as customizable or as extravagant as they once were? Let me explain. Now, the tradition of a death row last meal is definitely most common in the United States. However, this tradition is actually rather old, predating both the United States itself as well as the entire Christian religion. You see, for thousands of years, across almost every culture in the entire world, it was customary to give those a last meal who were set for death. The reasoning for this in ancient times was rooted in fear, specifically the fear that the spirits of the executed would come back as hungry ghosts if the deceased individual was not properly fed before their execution. That alone.
Bro, people back in the day were genuinely stupid, bro. How did we survive the Ice Age? How did we survive as cavemen with the dinosaurs? How did humans survive when people thought that the death row inmates were going to come back as hungry ghosts if we did not give them a final meal? I guarantee Jeffrey Dahmer's last meal was, hey, go ahead and kill one of the guards and just cook him up. Give him some roast. I mean, hey.
Is kind of hilarious, considering they're more scared that they will come back to haunt them because they were well fed rather than, you know, literally executed. But regardless, it's made its way through history in different civilizations and empires until it got to the modern day. For example, the Greeks would give their soon-to-be executed prisoners a final meal because they believed it was necessary for the dead to cross over into the underworld. And because they didn't want these individuals to return to haunt the overworld, they would give them a proper meal. And not too differently, in ancient Rome, they would give not only their criminals, but also gladiators large meals before the days of their fights in case they happened to have an injury or death during the games, ensuring that they crossed over to the other side without fault. And already, it's kind of seeming like the ticket to heaven is, well, a good meal. Now, focusing back in on the United States, for example, the last meal tradition made its way into the American prison system in the early 1800s. However, this practice was finally formalized by several states in the early 1900s, with different states having their own rules, with Texas being a notable example, specifically because in every state, the rules varied on what the meal could be. Most states that offered a custom last meal had certain rules. For example, in Florida, your meal could be whatever you wanted as long as the ingredients were purchased locally and didn't cost more than $40. And in Oklahoma, for example, the cost limit is only $25. And in Louisiana, of all places, typically during the last meal, the prison warden will join the prisoner for this last meal, which I can only imagine is a tense dinner. But interestingly, out of all of the places that offered a last meal, Texas was notable for being one of the most generous. Prisons would typically offer large requests, not setting extremely harsh budgets on the food. This, I'm sure, was appreciated by inmates on death row. However, it didn't take long for Texas to go from being a generous state to being a state that didn't offer custom last meals at all. And the reason why the state of Texas changed this rule is because of one individual. Now, if you've been watching Trust Me Bro videos for a while, you've probably asked yourself at some point, how does bro come up with these crazy ideas? And honestly, I wish I could tell you where they came from. However, what I can tell you is where you came from, with the help of today's video sponsor, MyHeritage. With the MyHeritage DNA test, you can learn all about your DNA, discover your family history, and explore your geographic origins. And now, for only $25, how could you pass up on all that amazing information? The DNA test itself is super simple. Just use the included swab on the inside of your cheek and mail it in to have it analyzed. Man, ain't
nobody gonna do this. I ain't even realized.
Thank you to MyHeritage for sponsoring this video. Lawrence Brewer, like basically everybody on death row, was not a good person. But Lawrence Brewer specifically was notably bad. Without getting too much into graphic detail, the reason why Lawrence Brewer was on death row was because him and two other individuals pulled a man named James Byrd Jr. from the back of their truck after brutally assaulting him, dragging him to his death simply because of his skin color. This hate crime and murder fortunately was punished to the fullest degree, although it's extremely disgusting that it even happened in the first place. With that being said, said even though Lawrence was on death row, he was still honored a last meal. And for this meal, he requested something extravagant. And the order goes as follows: 2 fried chicken steaks, a triple patty bacon cheeseburger, a cheese omelet, a bowl of fried okra, a pound of barbecued meat, 3 fajitas, a meat lover's pizza, a pint of ice cream, a slab of peanut butter fudge, and 3 root beers.
This man ordered the whole menu. Damn, how bad did you get in jail? Bro, this man was eating crumbs off the floor from flies. That's what got him fat? Bro, how fat do you gotta be to make that your last meal? I don't care. That is a queso type of meal. All of the queso. But man, that's comparable.
Surprisingly, the Texas prison system generously honored this rather extravagant request. However, in retaliation, once Lawrence was presented with this food, he didn't take a single bite. He pushed the plates away and simply said, "I'm not hungry." After it became obvious to the prison guards that he was not going to eat, he was taken back to his cell, and the food was, I'm assuming, thrown away or potentially eaten by some very hungry prison guards. And if that was the case, honestly, I'm just glad it didn't go to waste. Unsurprisingly, once the news broke that not only was this disgusting inmate offered such a generous meal, but he didn't even touch a single bite of it, it didn't only make headlines, but it boiled the blood of prison officials in Texas. And it was because of this stunt by Lawrence Brewer that the Texas prison system instantly changed the rules, no longer offering any custom meals to anybody on death row. From when this happened in 2013 until the present day, if you are set for execution in Texas, your final meal is no longer whatever you want. It's whatever the cafeteria has that day. And while this isn't really the most upsetting story considering who this affects, you know, people literally being killed by the government because what they did was so horrible, but it is still a pretty interesting example of one person ruining the last piece of fun people on death row could have. This may seem like a tame start because it literally only affects inmates on death row. And you're right, and that's because this video is only going to get more and more crazy as it goes on. And by crazy, I mean affects more and more people. So let's move on. The touchdown shutdown. I love sports. They're fun to play, they're fun to watch, they're fun to learn about. All around, sports are just a great thing that bring people together. But admittedly, I'm not the biggest fan of professional sports. I just don't watch it a lot. But when I do watch professional sports, one of my favorite parts of it are the extracurriculars. You know, fights in hockey, trash talk in the NBA, the hilarious flops in soccer, halftime shows, and of course, touchdown celebrations. But did you know that in American football specifically, there was a touchdown celebration that was so prolific that it actually got banned from the entire NFL? Well, if you do, you're going to hear about it again. But if you didn't, let me tell you a crazy story. If you're a fan of American football, then the name Jimmy Graham is probably not unknown to you. Jimmy was born in 1986 in Goldsboro, North Carolina. It was drafted into the NFL in 2010 by the New Orleans Saints. Throughout his career, Jimmy played for the New Orleans Saints, the Seattle Seahawks, the Green Bay Packers, and even the Chicago Bears. And during his football career, he was not only known for his athletic ability, but also his unique touchdown celebration, with the most iconic being his football dunk on the goalpost. In case you're unfamiliar, almost every time Jimmy would get a touchdown, he would literally take the ball, run into the goalpost, and dunk it over the post, essentially like he was dunking a basketball. This, admittedly, was pretty badass looking, although it came with consequences because he was doing it so much, and it looked so cool that the NFL decided that no one man could have all that aura. I'm totally lying. If you look at this clip right here, you can see that after he dunks the ball, he literally bent the goalpost. And this wasn't an uncommon occurrence. Obviously, when one of the most foundational components of a sports field is, well, broken or at least misaligned, it has to be fixed instantly for the games to continue. And in the case of the goalpost being fixed after a dunk, these fixes were known to pause the game for anywhere from 2 to 20 minutes. And while these delays may seem minor, when you're talking about professional, live, televised sports, anything that throws off the schedule to that degree that isn't planned for is a major headache for networks, advertisers, and the league in general. It was for this destructive reason that the NFL ended up banning the dunk on the field goal, which in my opinion kind of solidified this move as one of the coolest touchdown celebrations ever, even though it was pretty disruptive and I'm sure really annoying for people actually working the game and probably even watching too. And while this is once again more of a niche rule that doesn't affect too many people, I would definitely argue it at least affects more people people and likely also had a trickle-down effect. Because imagine if you were growing up watching Jimmy Graham play football and your goal was to grow up playing the NFL and dunk yourself. If that was your goal in life and then you heard that dunking was banned, you probably just had one of your biggest dreams crushed. And while sure, you could probably dunk in amateur leagues, if the goalpost is being bent in the NFL, I can only imagine what would happen if you're dunking on amateur league nets. And I wouldn't be surprised if people dunking at home injured themselves or broke goalposts altogether. But yeah, Jimmy Graham not only made his own touchdown celebration, but used it so much he got it banned. And well, the rest is history. The sushi situation. I've never been to Japan, but it's definitely extremely high on my bucket list of places I want to go. The culture is so cool, the landscapes are beautiful, and the technology is just interesting. Obviously, here in the Western world, we enjoy a lot of Japanese technology, but over in Japan, they're still gatekeeping some of their coolest stuff for themselves. Most notably, in my opinion, the food conveyor belt. Honestly, I couldn't even tell you where I first saw or heard of this, but I just remember seeing people sitting at a restaurant and food coming to them on a conveyor belt and just being so
That is kind of amazing.
Initially, I questioned why Golden Corral didn't get this instantly.
Yeah,
but then
Golden
I thought to
Corral
myself,
is amazing
well,
though.
if Golden Corral had this, they would probably have to install wider doors so people could leave. But focusing back on the point, these food conveyor belts are relatively popular across Japan. However, in one popular sushi chain in the Gifu Prefecture in Japan, the conveyor belt was not only cancelled but replaced with a cartoon version, all because of the acts of one individual. It was a regular day near the beginning of 2023. People were enjoying their food at the Shoshiro restaurant in Japan. This restaurant obviously was known for its conveyor belt system. However, on this now infamous day, a 17-year-old boy walked into the Sushiro restaurant and sat at a table. During his stay, he had the very dull idea to film himself licking soy sauce bottles and teacups and even sushi and putting them back on plates, sending them down the conveyor belt for other people to have. Now,
and that is exactly how germs are spread. That is nasty.
This disgusting video went viral, and seemingly overnight, this video had
He's putting passion in it too, bro. Hey, guys, let's go to the restaurant and prank these guys, bro. Why are you licking stuff and putting it back? It's nasty.
For 40 million views, it was being posted on news outlets everywhere, seemingly exposing the vulnerability of this honor-based system.
So nasty,
having the honor to not mess with other people's food. To some, this instance may be considered a prank. However, the Japanese government and the restaurant chain did not see it that way at all. And this incident was actually dubbed sushi terrorism because of how seriously it was taken by Japanese officials. Because of the widespread outrage that was caused by this viral video, action was taken by both the police and the company that owned Shoshiro. The boy that did this food licking was arrested, but on top of being arrested by the police, he was also sued by Shoshiro for over $480,000 US in damages. And while
Alright now, bro. All he did was lick some food. I mean, I understand it's nasty. But suing him $480K, he probably did not even have that. And getting arrested for licking food is insane, man. That's crazy. Yo.
Being sued for nearly $500,000 may seem steep for licking some food. You have to understand that A, that's unacceptable and just disgusting and could be a health hazard if this individual, had diseases. But even still, this video going viral was detrimental for the restaurant itself and ended up causing the Shoshiro restaurant chain nearly 16 billion yen in market value. Simply because people saw this video, got grossed out, and decided they wouldn't be returning anytime soon. But not only did the company lose money because people were simply not going, the stock value of this company also dropped massively because investors were speculative about how the company can recover from such a PR disaster. And because the stock for the parent company that owned Shoshiro tanked, Shoshiro acted quickly and seemingly overnight replaced all of their real conveyor belts with real food with digital conveyor belts that had digital food that you can click on to order foods, but gone were the days where real food would just pass you by. And honestly, it's unfortunate that, well, one person ruined it for everybody. Although there is an argument to be made that while this dumb prank was disgusting, it also did expose a vulnerability that could have had worse consequences if somebody more devious wanted to expose it. But what do you guys think? Feel free to pause quickly and comment, but I'm gonna move on. If you're somebody with an active Netflix subscription and a fan of true very likely saw the documentary recently released about the Tylenol murders. This documentary was both interesting and also
Knew there was gonna be an ad. I knew it, man. I knew it. I knew there was going to be an ad. I was sitting there timing that too. I was sitting there timing it too, trying to get it perfect. Let's go. It was a little bit delayed, but I mean, hey, that's gold. I'm so goated, man. I'm so goated, man. I'm so goated, man. Wow.
Shocking, because as somebody who was born nearly 20 years after the Tylenol murder event took place, it's really quite crazy to try to imagine what a medicine bottle would look like without tamper-proof protection. Now, if you're unfamiliar with what the Tylenol murders are, they're actually rather mysterious. And to sum it up rather briefly, from September to October in 1982, there was a string of at least 7 deaths that were attributed to a mass poisoning of Tylenol extra-strength pills. This event was extremely unfortunate and killed both men, women, and children. And one of the saddest parts about this entire situation is that not only was nobody ever caught and convicted for this mass poisoning due to the fact that it made major headlines, also inspired other lunatics to poison other medicine bottles across the country. That's about all the detail I'm going to go into in regards to the murder specifically, primarily because next week I'm posting my part 2 to my Killers on the Loose video. And all I'm going to say is the Tylenol murders may make an appearance on that list. So if you're waiting for part 2 to my now fastest growing video, well, tune in next week. But focusing back in on the aftermath of this extremely upsetting situation. What happened and what did somebody ruin for everybody? Well, as I mentioned earlier, when these murders took place in 1982, medicine bottles had nowhere near the precautions they have today, largely because of this event. But the aftermath of these murders wasn't just 7 innocent people dead and Tylenol now having to put a few extra steps in the process of opening a bottle. As I already stated, when this story hit the mainstream, it not only inspired copycats, but terrorized the entire nation, as now anything seemed like it could have been potentially contaminated. And if you're somebody who experiences contamination OCD, I can only imagine that this would be a living nightmare. During the time that these murders took place, Tylenol had a 35% market share when it comes to over-the-counter pain medication. But after the murders took place, that market share dropped from 35% to 8%. And it took a lot of action from Tylenol to rebuild that trust among the community. And while these murders were undoubtedly tragic, there was at least a positive outcome out of these nearly unthinkable actions. That positive outcome, of course, being A, accountability from pharmaceutical companies, and also widespread reform. For example, as soon as this crisis took place, Johnson & Johnson, the company that owns Tylenol, issued a massive recall, essentially taking over $100 million worth of product off shelves across the nation. On top of this, Johnson & Johnson established a strong relationship with the Chicago Police Department, where the murders took place, to further be involved in the investigation. And on top of this, they also formed stronger bonds with the FBI and the FDA. All of these relationships were formed with the hope of finding the person who laced the Tylenol tablets that ended up killing innocent people. But of course, the most notable outcome that came out of this entire tragedy was the development and implementation of tamper-resistant packaging, most notably being induction seals. You know, the things that are really annoying to peel off every time you open basically anything nowadays. This tamper-resistant packaging became more or less of an industry standard, and that is a genuinely positive outcome, although it's upsetting that it took such tragedy for this seemingly simple implementation to be, well, implemented. But that's just on the Johnson & Johnson side. On the governmental side, product tampering was made an official crime to further prevent any actions even remotely similar to the Tylenol murders. And on top of both of these beneficial changes, the FDA also introduced more stringent regulations when it comes to filled capsules instead of powder-pressed tablets to help further prevent product tampering. And it was with all of these positive changes, and I'm sure millions, if not billions spent in PR, Tylenol's market share was able to return in only a year's time, which is rather impressive. But to circle this back to the entire point of this video, things that got banned because one person ruined it, let's dissect this a bit. What was technically banned in this situation? Well, I guess product tampering and, well, unsealed pill bottles. And while those are things that are definitely not beneficial, the reason why I wanted to talk about this specifically was because, well, nothing was really banned per se besides things that already should have been banned, but I wanted to talk about it because one person definitely ruined something for everybody. That being basically the trust of people to not mess with products on shelves, causing almost everything nowadays to be sealed for your safety. Or at least that's what they say. And ultimately, I do think this was a beneficial change, although it is kind of upsetting why it is required. But just so this video technically fits the theme, the thing that was banned was, yeah, you can't sell pharmaceuticals without having a tamper-proof seal. But in case you want more of an example of ruining for everybody, although it wasn't banned, in that Halloween that followed the Tylenol murders in October of 1982, because people were so paranoid about the recently poisoned Tylenol, people were extremely suspicious of poisoned candy, which is why in Halloween of 1982, it was reported that Halloween attendance across the country was at an all-time low. And grocery stores even reported that candy sales were down over 20% compared to previous years, which honestly, I believe is a valid fear. And is just another upsetting example of how one person's actions can affect, well, an entire nation. The mustache must go. I wish I had a better transition, but you know how I just talked about one person's actions affecting an entire country? Well, now we're gonna discuss how one person's actions affected, well, the entire world. Look at this image right here. What is the first thing when you think of when you see this piece of facial hair? Did you say famous, beloved comedian Charlie Chaplin? Well, I'm sure a few of you little hipsters did, but I would say the overwhelming majority of you instantly thought of Adolf Hitler when you saw this mustache. And I would bet money that you don't even know the name of this mustache. If you ever had to refer to this mustache, you would call it a Hitler mustache, which just goes to prove how synonymous this mustache is with the evil dictator from Nazi Germany. The traditional name of this mustache is known as a toothbrush mustache, and it's a small, narrow style of mustache that just sits on the center of your upper lip. And as I mentioned, before it gained popularity in, well, politics, it was popular among normal people as well as comedy legends such as Charlie Chaplin and Oliver Hardy. But if you try to sport this mustache yourself, well, nobody's gonna say, hey, nice Charlie Chaplin mustache. And it was for this reason that this facial hair was more or less retired. Admittedly, the toothbrush mustache, at least to my knowledge, was never formally outright banned, at least legally. But I would definitely say socially, this mustache was definitely banned, although that doesn't mean that there was attempts to bring it back. Probably the most infamous example of somebody sporting a toothbrush mustache in the more modern era is Michael Jordan of all people. And you've just got to ask yourself, if anybody can bring back a piece of culturally banned facial hair, it has to be basketball legend Michael Jordan, right? But unfortunately, even he was not powerful enough to overcome the stigma of the mustache. And it was for this reason that even he himself faced controversy for sporting this mustache that, in my opinion, didn't really resemble a Hitler mustache too much because he also had a little bit of a goatee thing going on. And also there's some other glaring differences between him and Hitler. Mainly the haircut. I think it's just the haircut. But regardless, not only did he decide to have this mustache, but he also rocked it in a legit commercial. And I guess nobody on set just told him to not do that. But, you know, it's Michael Jordan in his prime. I wouldn't either. But yeah, even Michael Jordan couldn't have a mustache that even loosely resembled the toothbrush mustache simply because the stigma is just so bad. And I guess rightfully so. Although it is a bit unfortunate because the mustache didn't do anything. It was the man wearing the mustache. But in case something being socially banned isn't enough for you, well, there's also a plethora of things that are actually banned due to the actions of Adolf Hitler. One of the more interesting bans is the fact that several countries have actually outright banned naming yourself or your child Adolf Hitler. For example,
who would even do that in the first place? Who was stupid enough to do that? Who would set up their child to be able to do that in the first place? Like, bro, that is evil. You should get the death penalty. You should just be executed if you even think about naming your kid that. Who would even do that? What is the point of even banning that?
In Germany, Malaysia, Mexico, and New Zealand, it is all illegal to be named Adolf Hitler, which I think is understandable. But I think potentially more interesting is that in some US states, it is also prohibited to be named Adolf, although this isn't federally enforced and it's on a state-by-state basis. And another rather unfortunate byproduct of the entire, well, Nazi thing, besides all of the obvious war crimes and acts against humanity, is the fact that Hitler not only stole the swastika from Hinduism, but essentially tarnished the symbol forever. You see, I think it's relatively common knowledge now that the swastika doesn't originate with the Nazi party. It actually originates in Hindu culture. In some Hindu cultures, the swastika can either mean prosperity and good luck or being conducive to well-being. And it's a generally positive symbol. However, when the Nazis appropriated the symbol and used it to, well, represent one of the worst regimes to ever exist in modern, if not all of history, the symbol that they appropriated was essentially tarnished forever. Which is unfortunate because there has been some viral videos online of some uneducated person with a camera berating an Indian person for being a Nazi, when in reality, that's not the case at all. Beyond these few more lighter-hearted examples, there's a lot of other things that were outright banned due to the actions of Adolf Hitler. Although, for the sake of this video being a little bit more lighthearted, I want to discuss some that were not as, well, straight up depressing. And just to quickly save this video from getting too dark, I just wanted to say, by the time you're watching this video, we probably hit
Maybe nobody care.
Year 2025 and soon to be 2026, consumers are more privy than ever. And that's because businesses and individuals have been scamming people since the beginning of time. If you don't believe me, watch my video about scams in every time period. But with that being said, with people being more and more skeptical, businesses have had to come up with ways to convince customers that not only are they not being scammed, but if they are unhappy with their purchase, the business will take care of them. And it was for this reason that the satisfaction guarantee was established. The satisfaction guarantee is not necessarily a formal or governmental rule, it's essentially just a marketing trend and a company policy that kind of took off across corporate America. And honestly, it's a positive one that's in the consumer's favor. Now, I don't know about you, but every time I hear satisfaction guaranteed or refunds with no questions asked, I always am a bit skeptical. Although I've never really taken up any brands on this besides, well, you know, the basic refund. But I may be more of a rare breed here because I think some people get their fair use out of satisfaction guaranteed. And in the case I'm about to discuss, some people, unfortunately, well, abuse this system and ruin it for everyone. Unfortunately, there is no shortage of people abusing systems that are meant to help people and just offer fairness to all. And those people, I can confidently say, suck. And while to this day, satisfaction guarantees are still offered widely, I do want to discuss one example where somebody's selfish behavior revoked the consumer rights of a lot of customers from a specific brand. The brand in question is LL Bean. LL Bean is a famous clothing company that has had an almost legendary lifetime guarantee that it's offered for a long time on most of its clothes. The company took pride in this guarantee and used it as a symbol of the company's commitment to their product quality and overall customer satisfaction. And that, in my opinion, is noble. But as we learned in the first section of this video, no good deed goes unpunished. And just like somebody on death row exploiting a generous Texas prison, somebody buying jeans is going to exploit a customer satisfaction policy. So here's the deal. For the longest time, LL Bean had one of the best lifetime guarantees possible, and it actually went on for decades. How it worked is customers could return any LL Bean product at any time to any location for a full refund. It didn't matter how old or how worn the garment was. If you had an LL Bean garment and you were no longer satisfied with it, you could take it to any LL Bean store to have it replaced. And in my opinion, that system is so cool. But of course, people had to ruin it. And in the case of LL Bean, they in 2018 made a statement and officially changed their policy. They essentially ended and revoked the lifetime guarantee on most of their products, limiting it to the standard return within a year if you have a proof of purchase. The 1-year return compared to the 30-day return is still generous, but it's a massive shift from what they originally had. And LL Bean even said themselves that the reason that they ended this program was due to a pattern of abuse of a small group of people, and they could no longer enable this behavior. Now, with that being said, LL Bean never pursued any legal actions or dropped any specific customer names, although they did make it known that people were abusing their generosity, and for that reason, they had to make some changes. This is definitely one of the more lighter examples we've discussed in this video, but it's definitely something that affects probably the most of us. And to me, it's truly just upsetting how one person or a small group of people can truly ruin a good thing for everybody. And I know it's easy at this point to get nihilistic and pessimistic and lose faith in humanity,